All right. Before I begin, I would like to take the time to apologize if my voice sounds bad or if I sound short of breath or winded. Uh, I'm coming off of a bronchial infection, so I'm not all there. I just cleared my steroids and antibiotics, and I'm currently still on an inhaler to help clear me out, but so I apologize for the record. But with that being said, uh, let's begin. I've never really done these kinds of reviews for the record, but because normally when I do reviews, I usually do reviews for movies, usually only. But today I want to try something different and I want to review a series. So today I'm going to review Twilight of the Gods. What is Twilight of the Gods? Twilight of the Gods is an animated series on Netflix made by Zach Snyder. The show is effectively about Ragnarok, I guess. I want to start this off by talking about what I at least liked about the show, and then I'll get into other things. Well, actually, first, let me go ahead and break down like the plot synopsis of the show. Twilight of the Gods is about a series about a young woman named Sigrun and her fiance Leif. Uh, they talk about originally how the story begins is they're introduced. They met each other during a battle. Uh, to give long and short of it without really breaking spoilers. Long and story short, as these two characters go to get married, Thor shows up, slaughters the bride's family, and thus sets off a chain of events that follow through with her pursuit of Ragnarok, or her pursuit of revenge to kill Thor, and by extension, she sets off the chains of events that cause Ragnarok. In current year, that's a story we've, I think, seen 1,000 times throughout the series, or at least the first few initial episodes. She recruits her host of her party, as it were. You know, in the realm of fantasy, the typical D&D fellowship kind of thing. To be fair, some of these characters are actually rather interesting. I felt anyway. Now, let me get into what I actually did kind of like about the series. I liked, for some reason, I kind of dig the animation style. I felt like it was actually rather fluid, even if it was kind of simplistic. I still felt that it was actually very fluid and artistic at the same time. Yeah, and it which really it really does come to light during like a lot of your action sequences. But if there was one thing about this series that I actually did really like, it was the voice acting. Rather, if anything, I felt like a lot of the voice acting in this series was actually really good. Particular for three characters in particular. Uh, I might be fucking up his name, but I believe it's the actor's name is Peter Osabek or something. I know he's a Scandinavian actor for the record, but he's the voice of Thor. And I felt like, because every time Thor is on screen, he does kind of. I mean, this show does. Well, we'll get into that later, but I felt like they made him kind of menacing, but they also kind of made him understandable as well, in a very strange way. Even if Thor is poorly characterized, he's still an interesting character when you have him on screen. But for me, I think like there's also Peter Stormare or Stormare, or however you say it. He's the voice of a character called Ulfr, who is effectively an Ulf Hedner or Ulfhedin style character. In fact, I think he's realistically the only character in the whole group of Sequence champions that I actually probably like the most because he doesn't talk much, which is weird given the fact that I did admit that I liked the voice acting. But for me, the biggest scene stealer in the whole series was actor John Noble, who you probably may remember as Lord Denethor from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is the voice of Odin himself. And he actually is very good as Odin. He comes off as this omniscient, wise, like weirdly how they try to depict many of the Aesir gods as villainous. Odin doesn't really. You just they do. I feel like they do capture that essence of Odin, where he is neither good nor is he evil, and I can actually appreciate that. And John Noble did a very stellar voice performance. To be fair, as he always does. But now I would rather focus on what I didn't like about this show. And unfortunately, that is a lot. I feel like one of the things that hurt this was I feel like this show is trying way too fucking hard to try to be clever. I also feel like there's a lot of plot inconsistency as well. It's, which honestly, in truth, really shouldn't be surprising given the fact that this is Zach Snyder at the end of the day. And unsurprisingly, his wife Deborah is also involved in the series, which, based on what I know about her, is not why I'm not particularly surprised that one of my other major cons of the show is hyper present. And that is the injection of a lot of current day bullshit. In 2024, we already know what that is. It's characters being race swapped to be more inclusive or whatever. Characters acting nothing like what they should be. Uh, the fluidity of sexuality where everybody's just randomly bisexual for like no fucking reason whatsoever. Like it it shorts you out. At least it did for me because it killed the pacing. Like there's one character in particular that it when they go to kind of bring his character into the fellowship as it were, it opens up with him. He's like raw dogging some big tittied blonde chick, and then it pans out to reveal that he's also getting fucked up the ass by her brother. And for some reason, and you see a lot of shit like that in this series, and it kind of turned me off. Like, because it's like, I don't need, realistically, I could have done without any sex scenes in this show at all. But when you ham fist, like, oh yeah, like, where just randomly any character can just jump back and forth between seeming heterosexual or bisexual. It's really weird with tone. And it makes no fucking sense. Like, why the fuck is this shit even in this show? Like, I don't know. Like, I could have done without the sex scenes completely. I also feel like a lot of characters, like where some characters I felt like were explained and explored rather well and kept, very simplistically. It's Zack Snyder at the end of the day. So the guy's not good with narrative. And more importantly, he's not really good with establishing overarching backdrops for characters. Like Zack Snyder fanboys can go eat a fucking dick. He's not good at character development. He's not. And I think really for me, like what bothers me is this does the same shit that we've been seeing a lot when it gets to artistic expressions of Norse paganism and the myths and the legends and stuff like that is excuse me. but it does this thing where rather than just, you know, try to just tell the stories as they are, they have to like ham fist. It's what I call the fan fiction approach, where you take a lot of shit and you just kind of throw it at the, you just make shit up and then try to tell the perspective of that, of this grander story, when reality this show would have been just fine if it would have just tried to tell the story of the events of Ragnarok as they are told in the sagas, and well, through the sagas and the legends, rather than just try to do this weird D&D bullshit. Like, I feel like this show is trying to be like, what's that Amazon series, that Deus Ex Machina or whatever. It's trying like to be like that, only this is coming off like, I would argue that this show's a little bit more reserved, but at the end of the day, it's still the same kind of shit. Only, as a Norse pagan, it annoyed me. You know what I mean? It's effectively another show, another franchise, another what the fuck have you, trying to depict the gods as villainous monsters and everything like that. Like, they try so hard to demonize Odin in this, because they do that same misconception of, oh, Odin took the goddess Freya as his wife against her will, when any pagan, Norse pagan, worth their salt knows that Odin's wife is Frigg, not Freya. They're Freya and Frigg, two completely different entities, but they try to do this weird amalgamation, try to turn them into this weird amalgamation of the two, and it's stupid. But the worst part is they try to like bastardize Odin. They try to make Odin into this like monstrous kind of villain, and he never comes off like that. In fact, he kind of comes off as a guy who everything he does kind of runs parallel to Loki, who Loki in this series, he basically triggers everything because he's just trying to save his kids, because he knows that, which for some reason, again, it's weird, because to give you an idea of how much they creative artistic liberties they take with this series, they gender swap Jormungandr into a chick who can take a human-esque form, and they reveal that, yeah, she used to fuck Thor at one point, which everyone knows that in the story of Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungandr are like the eternal enemies, destined to kill each other in Ragnarok at world's end. Like, I don't need to see a gender swapped Jormungandr sucking Thor's dick on a fucking beach. Like, why is this in here? And the show does a lot of that. But it does the same, it kind of does the same thing like what the God of War games did, like the newer games, where they depict the Norse gods as effectively villainous assholes because they're just telling you the story from the perspective of the enemy side, the giant perspective of the gods, rather than just a straight up lens. And I always think it's funny in stories like that how like mortal human characters are like, or even characters who are allied with the gods themselves, are looking at it through this kind of weird lens of, oh, you guys are going up against the gods. Oh yeah, we'll join you, even though within the sagas and the myths and everything like that, those characters were actually allied with the gods who would fight on the side of the gods come Ragnarok. But this show just, like, it does, like every other current day attempts to adapt Norse pagan mythos into fucking stories. It just kind of ignores all that, and it's like, oh no, everybody just hates the gods because the gods are a bunch of tyrannical dicks. And in truth, I just didn't like that. But like, again, like it's so, like I said, it feels so weird because like effectively it all kind of like the most, I would argue, the most interesting plot lines. Really, actually, there really isn't any. Like it's like they try to lead you in one path and then it just kind of comes short, which, to be fair, is typical of Zack Snyder. So I guess, going into this series, I would say set your expectations low. But again, it's like when I mentioned about narrative inconsistencies, as I tried to mention, like with Odin, they try to demonize him as this horrible fucking monster, when in reality he's just a dude who's just trying to save his son. They do the same thing with Loki at the end of the day, where the only reason that Loki's manipulated everything up to this point is that he's just trying to save his kids because he knows of the prophecy of Ragnarok, and how, even though it's weird because like he's doing it to try to save Jormungandr, even though realistically Jormungandr, because he says only one of his children are going to die in Ragnarok, when it's like, no, actually Fenrir dies too, who's killed by Odin's son Vidar. Like, but that gets completely ignored again, and it's like, but when you look at Odin, they try to demonize him as, oh, he's this kind of authoritarian overlord, but you never actually see that. You never actually get that feeling of anything. He just feels like a guy who is just trying to save his people. But more importantly, he's just trying to save his son, but he's trying to save his son from himself. Uh, so it kind of renders like you just don't get that feeling. You just kind of feel like they're just telling you things without actually really showing it to you. And again, it's I'm just gonna be honest. Zack Snyder's not good at this, and honestly, I have to say he can go fuck. Him and his wife both can go fuck themselves for dabbling in something that they clearly don't know jack shit about. And fuck Netflix for letting them do it. I say that as a Norse pagan. And I think what's really sad is they try to build up towards this is going to have a second season. In truth, I don't think that's probably going to happen, because I'm looking around and nobody's talking about this show, which is probably why this review in and of itself will probably go unnoticed. Uh, and I don't think that's probably a bad thing, to tell you the truth. Uh, if you're someone who knows me and you've ever watched any of my movie reviews, I always end my movie reviews with a score, like a, what, 1 to 10 score. So I guess I'll just kind of stick to tradition on that one. For the Netflix series, for the Zack Snyder Netflix series Twilight of the Gods, I have to give this show a 4 out of 10. It's got, like I said, the animation's kind of, there's a simplistic beauty to the animation, and I thought the action sequences were really, really good. And I thought the voice acting in and of itself was also really, really good. But I feel like there's a lot of inconsistencies within the storytelling. I found some of the characters to be actually a huge portion of the characters to be genuinely uninteresting or bland, and then it's bogged down by all the current day hyper far left wing bullshit that plagues this show. And I say that as someone who's apolitical. Stop shoving this shit into TV shows. This whole reflecting the world we live in today shit doesn't need to be applied to settings like this. So, Hollywood, stop fucking doing it. It's why you're chasing people away. You're not just chasing right wingers away, you're chasing motherfuckers like me away. Stop it. Honestly, but this show is just not good. And I cannot, in good faith, recommend it to anybody. So, with that being said, yeah, Zack Snyder's Netflix series, Twilight of the Gods, 4 out of 10. Do not recommend. Fuck this show, fuck Zach Snyder, fuck Deborah Snyder, and fuck Netflix. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great day.